Welcome back to the podcast. Those of us who've been in a relationship long term have probably hit that point where we've kind of wondered, should we stay or should we go? And often we wonder, can our marriage be saved? What do we need to do to save it? And is it really our job to save it? So I brought on an expert to help us unpack this topic. We're going to be talking today with Monika Braglewicz and discussing what does it mean to actually save our marriage? And what are the things we need to think about if we are thinking about ending our marriage? I do want to preface this with, we are not talking about what we might call red flag relationships, those where there's major abuse, where there's a narcissist involved, where there is major addiction or heavy mental health issues. So please know that if you're in a situation like that, that takes having an expert to help you navigate ending or staying in that relationship. Today, we're talking about more of the common challenges that couples who've been together long term have, and when they really decide, should they stay or should they go? Welcome to Relationship Reset, a podcast for high-achieving couples who've been together for over a decade and don't want to feel like roommates anymore. I'm Katie Russler, relationship strategist and couples counselor with almost 20 years of experience helping ambitious couples reconnect, strengthen communication, and turn their relationship into the best part of their success story. This podcast is about using practical tools and a lot of real talk to help you understand your patterns, stop feeling stuck and discouraged, and start working on your relationship in ways that actually fit your busy life. Because your relationship shouldn't be the cost of your success, it should be the best part of it. So let's dive in. So Monika, thank you so much for being here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I work as a breakup and divorce coach. I've been through my own divorce. And what I do is I help people mainly navigate an endings or relationships, like I said, divorce or breakup from perhaps parents where they cohabiting parents. So I normally deal with people, or my clients are normally at the end of the relationship, or maybe they had a divorce or quite difficult breakup and they're trying to rebuild life again with, what do they want out of the future relationships and kind of values and dreams that they might have. So, yeah.
When you look at some shifts in the work of separation, divorce, and breakups in general, are you noticing any trends in age group of women or men? Any trends in what is bringing them to come to this point of, hey, I think it's time to end my marriage?
Yes. So there are kind of two moments. One is the midlife that, we talked about quite a lot, mostly for women. It's a very confusing time. We as women going through our own changes, going through these changes myself, actually. It's really confusing time. And that's when women kind of wake up one day, maybe not as in that sudden, but they realizing is what do they actually want from relationships with other people? And the first relationship is always with the intimate partner. So that's one kind of time of life. But also is when children leave home. I find that people tend to look at each other and think, I don't even know you anymore. So that could be obviously in later stages in your life. Some people have children quite late. They may be going through the stages of midlife. And that's how they may ended up in the relationship already. So they know what they want from a relationship, but then they kind of get lost in routines and careers and children. So I do speak to women in the 60s. Just kind of look at the partner and say, I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
I want to bring light to what you shared about that it's often people in midlife who are asking those questions, and especially the women as every cell of their being are changing in perimenopause, and they're kind of questioning so much. The trend now, especially in Europe, is that as they're going through that, the children they've had are going into puberty. So the navigating parenthood and that, navigating their own transition, and then their partners usually also navigating, do I change careers? Do I stay where I am? Am I happy as well? Right? This isn't always just one-sided with the woman going like, I don't know, everything's changing. There's also this like kind of identity crisis for men too of, have I reached my potential? Is this really where I want to be in my life? And so when you've got all the people in your home so unsettled, can my marriage be saved? Can this relationship make it? Is a very normal question to ask. And it's often that we have to kind of reflect back and say, what would it mean to end my relationship? What would that look like? And what would it mean to stay in it? So let's talk a little bit about When somebody really comes and says, can my marriage be saved? What are some things you have them think about?
The biggest cause of breakdown in a relationship is lack of communication. The lack of communication often comes from one, people like midlife. I don't know how I'm feeling. So how am I going to communicate this to my partner? I don't know what's going on for my children, like you mentioned, perhaps, in the puberty. No one knows what's happening. So what people tend to do is they just don't talk about it, right? Because if you don't know what to say, I don't know what to say. So my kind of first question would be, have you actually communicated, to your partner? Have you spoken to them about maybe even saying that you don't know what's happening for you, you don't know how you're feeling, and trying to work this out together? I think that avoiding the question is, and the conversation, it's the kind of, so when you say, can my marriage be saved? We do use, so I'm a practitioner coach. We do use a tool called No Regret. And it's about communicating with your partner, setting some new routines and new things you want to implement and try together. I suggest 3 months periods to then kind of see if the change can happen, whether you can maybe reassess your situation or your relationships or your happiness. But it starts with communication, even if the first sentence is, I don't know how I'm feeling.
I think it's really important you mention that you have them start to work on just the skill of communication for 3 months and then reevaluate. I always tell couples who are coming to do my rebuild program, give me 3 to 4 months. I'm going to teach you skills. You're going to put them in practice. Then let's see. Because I find that 3 to 4 month mark is where you see, are you really going to put forth the effort consistently? Are you going to change things? And if things change, do you still want to be in the relationship? Because frankly, it can improve and you can be like, still don't want to be here. And that's okay. I remember I've spoken with women before where I've said, okay, if everything improved, if he did all the things you wanted, would you still want to be in the relationship? And I've had a few women go, I'm going to be honest, I don't think so. And I'm like, okay, that speaks to it. And for men too, it's like if everything improved and you didn't feel responsible to take care of her, if she was able to financially be secure and she knows what she's doing next and it doesn't need you and things improved, would you want to stay? And sometimes they're like, no, actually. I'm like, okay, that gives you more of an answer than anything. But to say, hey, for at least 3 months, you got to work on the communication. I think that's so smart. So smart.
It's also through communication, you're learning by yourself because you've got to communicate what you want, right? You've got to start thinking about how are you feeling? And if you don't know why you're feeling a certain way, then you start to reevaluating your values, your needs, your boundaries. So I know it sounds quite simple, but I wrote a post today about small changes. Sometimes people, they don't want to make the small changes. They want the big change to happen tomorrow. We're so impatient of creating some small changes because we want a big impact. We want to see some dramatic situation change. But actually, through communicating on a daily basis, with the small steps, with implementing things like you mentioned, consistency. You might start with a really good intention, but you then realize after 2 weeks that, your partner, yourself, you get back into the old routines or actually you're not motivated to make the changes. So that also then creates another questions and more communication. So hopefully by the end of 3 months, or you mentioned 4, you will have an idea of where you are as a person in the relationship. And what you're asking for, is it realistic or, is it something where your partner can meet you in the middle? So yeah, it's a good tool, but it does take time.
Well, it's great that you brought up the fact that, of course, we want instant gratification and we want the big 180, but it took us years to get to the slump we're in, right? It took micro moments and it's going to take micro moments to improve, but we don't want that.
No.
Right?
Of course.
We're so miserable in that moment. We're like, oh, this is so horrible. I don't want to endure it any longer. But it's going to take all those little micro moments to create that big change, the big change we want. And really, you're right. 3 months, 4 months is when you go, okay, here's when change can start to show. That's compared to years. 3 months, you can do. Anyone can do. What about the challenge that can happen when it's around the theme of compromise? To have a strong relationship, we need good communication and we also need to be comfortable with compromise. But Monika, let's lead with, what does compromise actually mean? Because I think sometimes people go, it's like people pleasing, agreeableness. I just do what they want. That's not compromise. Will you explain a bit what real compromise is and how that really impacts a marriage?
Yeah, so the simplest way how I explain this to clients is about, and myself and my children, I've got three grown daughters. Compromise is a healthy thing to do. When it turns to sacrifice, when you're starting to feel that it's affecting your needs, as you mentioned, people pleasing, when you start kind of doing things that are against your values, your boundaries can be flexible if it's obviously because people say once you set boundaries, it has to be like that. Well, in a relationship, things change. So boundaries also can be flexible. But when it starts to become that your health, your needs, your well being is started to suffer, then that's when the compromise becomes sacrifice, which is not a healthy thing to be. And I'm not saying that every day has to be 50-50 because relationships are not like that. Some weeks maybe you might have to give a little bit more because your partner might need you, then, over the year, let's say if your relationship is balanced. But yeah, it's asking yourself a question when you find yourself in the situation when you think, am I compromising? And it's still within my values, my needs, my well-being and my boundaries. When you're sitting there thinking, actually, this is now affecting me, that's kind of what I would call you going into the stage of sacrificing.
Yeah. And I think we start to see resentment build up
Yeah.
with that, right? And there's a lack of communication around, hey, I feel like I'm giving in a lot to what you want. And I sometimes find that, and I don't know if you've noticed this too, that their partner doesn't always want them to give so much, to sacrifice so much. But it just becomes the normal status quo that when that shift happens, there's a bit of a temper tantrum of like, why are you being so disagreeable? Why are you being so challenging? And it's like, because for so many years I said yes.
Yes, I've been there myself once. And I think we do it as women mostly because we have children. So we obviously give as much as we can because we have homes and, the partner kind of gets swallowed in the whole, I just look after everyone. But I also, change doesn't have to be drastic in a way and aggressive. And, when I work with clients, people say, what's the secret to a healthy relationship? And I always say, it's you, no one else but you. When I started the moment I remember my kind of light bulb moment was that when I started to respect myself, people around me started to respect me as well. And it was a very scary place to be, to start saying to people, no. There's a way of saying no. You can, put it very nicely. Try practicing with your friends. If someone asks you for dinner and you literally have got no time or you're really tired, you can politely say no. You can say, I'm really sorry, whatever way you want to say, I'd love to go, maybe next week. Well, I found that people reacted with very kind words. They were like, that's fine. Thank you for letting me know. And if you do that in your own relationship, in your intimate relationship, you find that actually slowly your partner will just adjust and start respecting you for the person that you are. But what we tend to do is that we we collapse. And then we go, I can't take this anymore. And then and then your partner's obviously like, what's going on? So so we're going back to, again, communication. I've told you, I think, that story before when we talked about relationships and how we say people sometimes think, oh, I thought everything was okay, like until I was told it wasn't. So it's exactly what happens. Unless you tell someone how you're feeling, unless you start respecting your own kind of boundaries, then like you said, how do you expect others to read in your mind and knowing what you want?
Yes. And the fact that conversation we had before recording around often one partner's a little bit blindsided, like, I didn't think things were wrong. What are you talking about? The other partner will say, but I have been telling you I'm unhappy. I need more help. The issue is it's how we're communicating our unhappiness. It's how we're communicating, hey, I'm starting to hit my limit. And being able to really sit down with our partner and say, I need you to really look at me and I need you to really hear me changes the game. It's not just us going like, I need more help around here, or I'm not happy anymore in this relationship, right? Like that has a reactivity to it. But to sit down at the dinner table or on the couch and go, I need you to look at me. Put your phone away. We need to have a serious conversation. I feel myself increasingly unhappy in this relationship. And I know I've said it before, but we're hitting a point and a limit where I'm asking myself some difficult questions. I want this to be about us working together, and I need to know if you're all in or not, right? Like that is a very clear, no partner can say, I've been blindsided. I didn't know you were thinking about this. So, one thing that I think is really important that you speak to is that in cultures around the world, we have never really been taught how to deal with endings of relationships. And so, part of the fear of can my marriage be saved is also the fear of the ending of it and what that will mean and what that will look like. Can you talk with us a bit about that, about the challenge most cultures have around the ending of relationships?
I'm in London, as you know, so there are, various cultures. I think lack of knowledge is a big one in terms of when people separate and they throw this big statement, I want a divorce, without having done any research, having spoken to anyone. I don't know, you've watched telly, your friend told you something, you've read something in newspapers. And I think the knowledge about what exactly divorce or breakup means, what that means for the two people and the, let's say, children involved. What is it that you want to get out of this? Or what is the end result? Because sometimes people end relationships because they angry, they haven't felt loved with their partner. So what they're going to do is during the whole divorce, they not actually want the money or whatever they're arguing about, is they want to revenge because they feel that they've been hurt, right? Hurt as a pain hurt. So it gets then really messy because there's a lot of unresolved issues because of the lack of communication in a relationship already. People start to talk about things that they want to do or how they want to parent their children suddenly. And it's like, well, they've never even mentioned that before because they've grown so much apart that either they haven't been involved or they just allowed another person to kind of carry on as they want to. I always ask question to clients is that, when they're making decisions, is that what are they actually trying to get out of the whole, process in terms of benefits for themselves, but also for people that they've loved for so many years, the children that they have, and the people around them. It's a really big subject, but I found the knowledge and the kind of misunderstanding between the couples, which obviously got you there in the first place, that's kind of that's where the volcano and the tournament and everything of the turbulence of, divorce and breakup. It's on the unresolved issues in the relationships then get highlighted in that process.
I think it's good you brought up the knowledge about what it means to end a relationship. We're thinking legal,
Yeah.
financial, and then the emotional, mental knowledge. You're going to need a support system. You're going to have to talk about co-parenting in two different homes. You're going to have to talk about boundaries around new partners being introduced or not introduced. And if you differ on those opinions, right, and those thoughts, you're going to have to be talking about, but not with your partner, but with yourself and hopefully a support person, the grief that comes, even when you want to leave a relationship. I think this is one of the ones I see on repeat. I know you probably see it with women you work with. They didn't realize the amount of grief that was going to come because that was an end of a chapter of dreams and goals and visions. And even when it's like, I'm so unhappy and I want out, there's just still that lifetime of memories. And grief work comes with it. And it shows up in weird and wild ways. And a lot of women will get out and men out of a relationship and jump into other relationships, not realizing they're bringing all that grief and smaller traumas, right? It doesn't have to be big traumas, but the ending of something has its own traumatic effect on us. We're not educated about this. Right. And when we watch our friends go through it, it's only a piece of the puzzle of what they're really going through deep inside. And you're absolutely right that we don't provide the knowledge out there because we don't want to think of the ending. But the reality is that it can happen. It might happen. So what are ways that somebody's listening and they're like, well, how do I better educate myself on this? How do I go at this with a clearer mind that it's not about revenge? It's not about, just being like, oh, they're so boring. I want a more active and exciting life. And then they get out in the real world and they're like, oh, I'm the one that has to make it exciting. It can't be because of someone else, right? Where can they get good knowledge about this?
I think, like we said, we're going back to, no regret tool or, ending a relationship doesn't happen overnight, right? So there is, even conversations with your partner about how did we ended up here? When I met, I don't know, going back to my, first marriage, when I met my husband, I met him because he was the father of my children, my dreams, my goals, his role was very different. as the children were growing and I was trying to get my career or whatever, my needs changed. So then obviously the role of my partner in my eyes has changed. And then obviously by the time we were getting divorced, what I wanted really in a marriage and why I was getting divorced was, you can imagine, completely different from what I've already communicated. And what is it exactly? Why do you want to get divorced? What do you think you're missing in the relationship? And I think that's what I would say. If you're missing something and you try to find it with really good communications, with, like you said, it takes years to build a healthy relationship. And even then, second time marriage, every year, I'm saying every year, every so often, there's something that changes. The children will leave home, they will grow, they get new jobs. The dynamics in the families change, new friends come in, new jobs. Relationship is always is a work in progress. You can never sit down, drink a cup of tea and say, we've done it.
Right.
So in a way, it's like I always say to people, it's not even like, do you want to get divorced? It's like, what is that missing in your relationship? It's taking you to you wanting to get a divorce. Can you still find it? Is it something that perhaps is fine? Sometimes we grow out of relationships because the partner doesn't want to go certain directions that you want to kind of take. But you need to be clear, because if you're not clear, then the whole process of divorce becomes really messy, because you don't know what you want to get out of that process on the first place. It's a very difficult situation because not everyone copes with breakup or divorce or any kind of endings the same way. So some people go into a frozen mode, some people go very loud. That could be because they're anxious, because they're trying to protect themselves. We tend to turn into warriors that, we've got to protect what we've got, especially as mothers with children. It's really complicated, really. Yeah. But going back to you as all answers are in you. As long as you're clear with what is it that you want to achieve by getting divorced, what is it that you're missing? What's the life, looking forward? Is it that you just need maybe a bit of a change or work or put some spice into your relationship, start going on dating, get to know the partner again? Might not be. I'm not saying it will, but
Yeah. I like to use the analogy with my clients that when we're clear with what we want, right? When we're sure, it's like us saying the sky is blue. And when our partner or friend or coworker or family member says, no, the sky is yellow. I see it as yellow. It's always been yellow. I don't know what's wrong with you. It's yellow. And you're like, no, it's blue. We're not going to fight because we're confident it's blue. When we start to question our own thoughts and feelings, well, maybe it is yellow. Am I wrong? Maybe there's something wrong with me. Oh, maybe they figured it out. There is something wrong. When we freak out, we start to fight. But in our strong and secure confidence, when we have that clarity, the sky is blue. I know my reason for leaving. I know my reason for staying. There isn't a fight. There's no fight to be had because the internal fight isn't there. That's often what's being portrayed outside with others is the internal fight. It becomes external. So you're absolutely right. Be clear. I feel like you've given us some really good tools. I love the idea of start communicating your needs, but first know what your needs are. And to do that, you have to self-reflect. And I can see, Monika, why working with someone like you is so essential at this stage of should I stay or should I go? Because you're going to challenge them to go, okay, if this is really what you want, be clear, know the sky is blue, but also communicate what that means, what that looks like, and start to gather the knowledge and the support system around that. I think there's so much value you've brought today. And I really hope listeners, even if you're not on the fence, and many of you are not, but you've got friends who are, please send them this episode, because I think sometimes we just need to normalize the conversation of feeling uncertain in our relationship and knowing that doesn't mean anything's wrong with us. Like you said, needs change. Things are missing that we want to be there because we've been together for 15, 20 years. And we have our own personal growth. Like, thank goodness we're not the same people we were when we first got married. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm like, oh, yes, I've grown up. But our relationship needs to grow too. And as you said, sometimes our partner's not on board and they're just not interested. If you had one tool, one sort of piece of homework for our listeners to do this week, what would that be?
I would ask my partner, take some time and actually say, how are you? But how are you really? Take some time away from your screen, away maybe, hopefully, if you've got more children, maybe do it in the evening, have a cup of coffee in the morning. Really take your time to check in with your partner and check in with yourself that, it's your relationship at a good kind of stage, or is it something that perhaps is bothering you, but you're too busy or too tired to address? Because I don't think we say, how are you too often and not listen enough. And if someone says to you, maybe, you ask someone, how are you really? Or maybe if you ask yourself this question, how are you really? And you need a longer time to answer, then that means you need to take some time to figure out really how really you are. And that might happen to your partner as well.
And if you find when your partner asks you and you go blank, I don't really know, that speaks volumes. Like you're saying, it might mean you need more time. I love that homework, really talking with your partner intentionally, because even if you end the relationship, there's a connection there, and at least be friends and civil. And so, how are we really? How are you really? And then, kind of, how are we really is important. Monica, if people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram. I also have my website. I offer free initial consultations as well, because I know people are quite frightened to maybe even speak to me, because just because you're talking to a breakup and divorce coach doesn't mean you've got to go through the actual process yourself. But I think sometimes it's good to speak to someone from that kind of other end of the ending of a relationship to kind of, experience myself. But also, like I said, I'm a qualified practitioner. So maybe things are not as bad as you think they are, just with like few tools and a bit extra time that you can, improve on your relationship, communication. But yeah, I'm always happy to have a chat and maybe point people in the right direction. So yeah.
I love that, Monica. I'll make sure that the link to having a call with you, as well as all your social media, is in the show notes below. I appreciate your time. And dear listener, again, if you are not the one who's going through a difficult time in your relationship, but you know someone who is, please pass this along, because maybe they do want to reach out to Monica. She's based in the UK. And so time zone, if you're here in Germany, it's an hour before. But it's just so easy to talk with her and to discuss these topics. Again, Monica, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm a very big fan of what you do as well. So yeah, I'll continue to be obviously connected with you, and look forward to, speaking to you more maybe.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. And dear listener, we'll see you next week. Before you go, I want to leave you with this. The effort you put into your relationship is one of the most important investments you'll ever make. How you communicate and grow together shapes your home, your leadership, and the example you set for the people around you. Relationship work is truly legacy work, and it quietly impacts more lives than we often realize. If this episode resonated, consider sharing it with someone you care about, a partner, a friend, or another couple who's building a full life and want their relationship to be the best part of it too. And if you're enjoying these conversations, make sure to follow or subscribe to Relationship Reset. Leaving a rating or review also helps this message reach more couples who are ready to grow with intention. I'll see you next week.